So, Kayna, one of the biggest things from the probable cause affidavit that sticks out to me is that Brian Coburger's cell phone was found to be used in that area near the house at least 12 times before the night of the murders. And we know that Kaylee Gonzalez had told people that she thought she might have a stalker. So in what you've learned, do you believe that Coburger was actually stalking Kaylee or any of these victims, and why?
So here's what I'll say is that when I spoke with Steve Gonzalez, Kaylee's dad, about the potential of her having a stalker, he did bring up a single incident to me that really stood out to them. And I will say that investigators looked into that single incident. They found that specific person. They interviewed that person and they said, you know what, this is in no way involved in these murders. However, authorities received the search warrant to look through his phone records because they were trying to figure out specifically if Coburger was stalking any of these victims or surveilling the house. And so when they put it together that he had been there, 12 times prior to the murders and then again in the morning after, that I think is what authorities are looking into right now, and that will help them spell out in the end their motive and, of course, why they believe this was targeted and who or what was targeted.
Yeah, and even through all this, I mean, we still really don't know much at all about Coburger's possible motive for these killings. So what, if anything, have you learned about him and his background through this whole process?
Right, and I'm sure, like you were, it was really surprising to learn that he was so highly educated, right? And maybe that was surprising for us, but one police source I spoke with said it wasn't surprising to them as they were going through this investigation. He's pursuing his PhD. I think one of the things that I thought was really interesting, though, was that he went back to his normal life. He was teaching. He was back on campus. And we hear from students where he was a TA that say after the murders, at times he looked a little bit disheveled, a little bit unshaven. One student even told us, whoa, he thought maybe finals were really getting to him. And then that we learn he drove across the country with his father in that white Elantra, getting pulled over twice in Indiana. So I think there's still a lot to be learned. I think there's still more questions than answers at this point. But authorities really are taking their time to make sure that they put this case together the right way so that they can get, a conviction in the end.
Yeah, even a WSU football player I covered had him as a TA, and he even shared an email strand that they had together after the murder. So now, Kayna, a lot of people, including us, were frustrated by the lack of information given by law enforcement in the weeks after the murders. But the affidavit clearly shows they were really on top of things all along. So how impressed are you by the work of local law enforcement and really the cooperation between different departments here?
I know. I mean, this arrest is a real testament, right, to the work that authorities did. And Moscow police remained the lead this entire time, but they immediately brought in Idaho State Police and then the FBI, and they worked collectively to bring Brian Coburger into custody. And again, that's a huge testament to their work. But also, as you know from being near that area, you know how hard hit that Moscow Police Department was, right? Most of the people in that department went to the University of Idaho themselves. They love this area. It is their home. And they were gutted by what happened. And so not only were they investigating this case, but people were lashing out to them as if they weren't doing enough. And the entire time, each day, they were getting closer and closer to their suspect.
Yeah, and you've had some pretty great access to some of the victims' families through all this. So what more can we expect to hear from them in the 2020 special tonight?
Yeah, I mean, let me say I'm so thankful to the bravery that these families and friends of these victims have. I'm so grateful to them for sitting down with me and sharing these stories, because it wasn't easy. When I sat with some of Kaylee and Xana's friends the other night, there was a lot of laughing and shared stories, and there was a lot of tears. And overwhelmingly, from them, from their friends, they're not worried about themselves at all. They feel sad because they feel like the world has been robbed of really great people, and they want the world to understand who these kids were. And, Steve and Christy Gonzalez have been at the forefront of all this. They've become pillars of strength in that community. And also, in our 2020 special, you'll really hear from Madison's father for the first time. He calls her Maddie Mae, and it's really sweet.
Yeah, I think so many of us just want answers for these poor families who have suffered so much. So thank you so much for your time.